Good morning, everybody. My name is Keith Pabian, and thank you so much for coming today. I was saying to Beth leading up to this webinar that this is definitely going to be the most difficult year when it comes to staffing. And so I'm so glad that you made time for this. I really appreciate you doing this during the season. And yeah, so my name is Keith Pabian. I am a very proud FLCMAA member, sponsor, whatever you want to call it. I actually own two companies. So I own Pabian Law, which is essentially one of the largest H-2B law firms in the country at this point. Even though we're based up in Boston, we have most of our clients in Florida. It's definitely where we work with the most, and some of our most treasured clients are in the areas. We work all around Florida. Basically, we follow the coast is the way I always say it. From the west down to the Keys and then back up, and even on the Panhandle. Seasonal Connect is a newer company that I own that went live last July, and it was somewhat of a fortunate accident for us that it went live when it did, because I'll talk about that at the end as a real solution to what you are all walking into as we head into a very, very, very difficult filing year. All right, so here's my goal for today. I want to talk about, I'm going to start with the basics. So for any of you that haven't done immigration before, if you haven't employed foreign nationals, I'm going to talk about them and how you can utilize them. I am then going to go into the current state of things and why this year is poised to be the most difficult yet. And then we're going to talk about best practices and solutions. All right, so that is my goal for today. I will also leave time for questions at the end. Beth was wonderful enough to create this as a Zoom meeting rather than a webinar, so I'll really be able to answer questions when we go. Beth just put this in during the course of this. She's going to put in the link to the survey, and I'll give you the password at the end so that you can get your credits before you head out for the day. All right, so let's start with the basics and go from there. So this is why H-2Bs are so prominent in Florida, is that there are not many visa options for employers looking to employ foreign nationals when it comes to the hospitality area. All right, so with clubs, if you need to go outside of the United States population to employ people to solve your staffing, there's just not that many options. You have the H-2B and J-1, and then you have year-round options hypothetically, but the year-round options are either awful, they're not practical, or they have gotten so difficult to get that it's not a viable option. Over the course of the last decade, the Immigration Service has made it more and more closed in terms of who qualifies for year-round visa options. So what's happened is a lot of our clients have really moved towards sponsoring people for permanent residency, which is green cards. They'll sponsor someone for a green card if they want to employ them year-round. But in terms of employing them for the season and even to carry you through the green card process, that's where the H-2B comes in. All right, so here's what an H-2B is. You can get it for up to 10 months, all right, but it's always going to be for your season. So for most of you in Southern Florida, what that ends up looking like is an October or November start date through April or Mother's Day, right? That's pretty much what most of you are looking at. That being said, all of us know this. COVID has definitely extended your seasons. And so what that means is that if you need to extend your season, we might be able to do it. You might be able to do it, but the max that you can apply for in a given year is 10 months. All right. It's based on the seasonal need. If you can't show seasonality, you don't get it. H-2Bs have definitely evolved through the years, where it used to be that you just told the story that you're in Florida and gets really muggy and thunderstormy in the summer, and that's why you're a winter season. At this point, they do want to see the data, the revenue, the staffing projections, and the staffing history, and so on. This is something you apply for annually. And I think a lot of our clients are really happy at this point that you do apply annually, because when you do so, you get to make tweaks year to year. You can change the dates. You can change the number of people in the positions. You can also change what positions you're applying for. And why our clients are happy about that right now is in this current US staffing crisis, more and more of our clients are adding job categories, they're adding people. You're going to hear me talk a lot about job categories during this. The H-2B visa process really is all about what job you're applying for. So let's say your club needs line cooks and servers or line cooks and dishwashers. That's really the way the application process goes for the vast majority of it. The individual people only come in at the end. All right. You get to set the requirements. So if at your club you want your line cooks to have 6 months of experience, you certainly can. And then at the end of the process, the workers either can come in from outside the country or they can transfer from a opposite season property. So let's say that you are in Palm Beach Gardens and you have a winter season need. You could look for summer season organizations that might want to send their workers to you for the winter. All right. Keep in mind this last bullet point, when we get into some of the advanced issues, this is the biggest issue right now. All right. It's really the recruiting and where the workers come from. Because the thing that I'm nervous about as we're heading into this year is whether the out-of-country workers will be a real opportunity for many of you. All right. So now on the other side, you have the J1 visa. Okay. This is a much different visa than the H-2B. H-2B was designed as a workhorse visa. It was designed to allow people to come into the United States, work their butts off and go home or move to another organization. The J1 visa is a cultural exchange visa. It was designed for people to come in post-graduation. So these are kids who are, a lot of times they're holding their first hospitality job, and learn about the United States culture while practicing what they've learned. In Florida, we mostly see the intern category, where they're with you for 12 to 18 months, moving around departments or responsibilities every few months. Most of you, in my experience, don't have a large J1 program. All right. Most of you really just use them for this intern category. Your summer season counterparts, however, a lot of them use the J1 summer work and travel category. And that's a 4-month J1 where I think of them as bodies, right? These are recent graduates. A lot of times they're there when your college kids are too, or when the college kids used to be there, if you can still find the college kids, but they're really there in the summer. It is something you can look at for the winter, but so far for winter season organizations, we see it more in ski country at ski mountains than we do with you guys at Florida clubs. All right, pros and cons of both. H-2Bs, you get professional workers. They're usually some of your best. A lot of times I hear that they bring up the whole level of your staffing. Hopefully you can bring them back year after year, which your members can love. Once they arrive, you treat them like everyone else. So from a client compliance standpoint, once they arrive on property, there's not a ton of compliance, although there is so much compliance obligations around the H-2B program that you need to be really careful about. There is this numerical cap, and I actually need to update it because now it also includes winter season employers too, which we'll talk about. But also the H-2B is a cost to the club. All right, so that's the biggest issue, or the biggest difference between H-2Bs and J1s. Is that with H-2Bs, it's a cost to the club, right? It costs money. J1s are different. Essentially, they pay their way, but you get either students or people who have little to no experience. There's not a ton of employer sponsorship obligations. There's not as many compliance mandates because it goes through this third-party company that's really in charge of those. It's a good management training opportunity. Like a lot of the managers like it. There are cultural requirements. I always think of J1s as kind of a good entry into the world of immigration if you're nervous about it. Okay, with H-2Bs, especially this year, you need to start on time. All right, so here's the thing that I will tell you, and I say this with so much love to all of our Florida clients. Because the demand for H-2Bs has not been as much as the supply, meaning that you haven't had to worry about them running out of H-2Bs. One of the things that we see with our winter season clients is that the stress level to meet deadlines isn't always what it is with our summer season. Our summer season clients have been dealing with supply and demand issues for many years now. And so they get very nervous and they're very deadline oriented. With our winter season clients, they haven't had to deal with this before, and they're a little bit more relaxed in terms of deadlines. This is a much different year, and you're going to hear me say that many times during this hour. So for this year, if you're a winter season property, with which the vast majority of you are, April 1st is when we start our petitions. And if you start late, you might not be able to pull it off. All right, so April 1st is when you want to be starting your petitions for next winter season, which I know is hard because a lot of you are still in season at that point, or all of you are still in season. Okay, in terms of what we're seeing, these are the most prominent positions that we see at our office. Cooks and dishwashers in the back of house, servers and bussers, runners front of house, a lot of cleaning. Front desk has gained more prominence, including in the spa. Grounds and maintenance, retail and cashiers, even in the pro shops. And then our ski clients do a lot of lift operators, snowmakers, and ski instructors. In terms of popular countries, they update these every year. This year, thankfully, didn't have too many surprises, if any. But we see a ton of Jamaicans in Florida, a ton of Eastern Europeans and South Africans. Filipinos have come back in to play. There's a lot of countries that you can recruit from. You can be any size. It doesn't matter if your club is small. If you're struggling to find staff, H2Bs are a real opportunity here. All right? It's not just for the big clubs anymore. You are not required to provide housing or daily transportation to the work site, but you need to have answers. One of the things that we're about to talk about is how hard recruiting is going to be. Make sure that you have answers when it comes to where people are going to live and how they're going to get to work. You can charge for it. Most of you now subsidize, but you want to have answers of how people are going to get to work and where they're going to live when you're doing recruiting. Okay, so let's get into some of the hard stuff, okay? And I will tell you, I would be nervous if I were many of you entering this year. I'm nervous. The problem that we're having right now is that as an industry and as an H2B, essentially as an H2B or hospitality immigration lawyer, this is what scares me now. The demand for H2Bs has never been higher. And the reason why is that so many Americans disappeared from the workforce, especially in the hospitality industry leading up to or during COVID. It was already happening ahead of COVID, but COVID definitely accelerated it. All right, so here's the problem, and then we'll go into each season. All right, or here's the basics, and then we'll go into the problem. In the 90s, when Congress created H2Bs, they very stupidly create this random, they created this random cap that had this arbitrary number attached to it that doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't fluctuate based by unemployment. It doesn't fluctuate based on you being successful in finding or not finding American workers. It's just a set cap. The government uses an October 1st fiscal year. Okay, so the government year starts on October 1st, and that's the first date of the numerical cap. So from October 1st until March 31st, they make 33,000 H2B visas available. All right. Then from April 1st until September 30th, the other 33,000 are available. So basically what I'm saying to you is the cap starts October 1st, which is good in some ways for some of you, because I know some of you have October 1st start dates. So if you have an October 1st start date, that's the first day that they replenish the numbers, right? That's the first day that the cap has the full amount of visas in it. Now, the cap only applies, only applies to workers coming from outside the country. So that Jamaican worker that's in Kingston that wants to come to the US, that person counts against this cap. And if the cap is hit, if there are no more visas left, that person in Kingston can no longer come to the United States. Now, that same worker, that same Jamaican worker that might be up in Cape Cod for the summer, if that person's transferring down to Florida, that person does not count against the cap as long as he or she has an H-2B visa. So someone already in the United States on an H-2B visa does not count against this arbitrary cap. Okay, that's the basics of the problem. Now, I want to show you the summer season first. Even though most of you are winter season, I want you to see how scary it is right now. The cap was announced that it got hit within the last month. So this is pretty new information, okay? This year, they got 136,555 worker applications just for April 1st. Okay, so for the first day of the summer season cap, they got almost 137,000 applications for a cap that's only 33,000, right? The math doesn't line up here. Now, the other thing that's scary, and this is the thing I think that you should pay attention to as a winter season organization, The year before, they only got about 97,000. So the number of applications jumped by about 40,000 workers for summer season between 2021 and 2022. Again, so it jumped by 40,000. There's only 33,000 available. That's what should scare you. And for summer season, that's only the first day. That's April 1st. That doesn't count all the employers that have like April 15th, May 1st, May 15th start dates, and so on. So here's winter season. And here's where all of you need to be really paying attention for this year. Okay. This is a real issue for the first time. Last year, you guys were blessed. Most of you were very fortunate that you had October or November start dates, because organizations that essentially had December 1st start dates and later did not get into the cap. The cap was hit. But here's what's to scare you more, and this is what scares me, okay? It was hit 6 weeks earlier than ever before last year. The government was receiving about 4 times as many applications per week as they ever had at the height of the cap. What's scary to me, in addition to all of that, is that from our office, just anecdotally, we're seeing more demand this year than we did last year. Meaning that last year we didn't see this coming. This year, it just feels like there's so many more organizations reaching out. And those organizations aren't ones that necessarily would have typically reached out. They might be suburban or metropolitan organizations. They might be ones that have always been in college areas where they haven't needed to turn to international workers. This is going to be an issue this year. And I have no doubt that there are going to be clubs in Florida that are affected by this cap. Okay. So this is what scares me. I will also tell you, the government, the immigration service is not very helpful. I always think of this in this context, but the immigration service was actually created to keep people out. It was created as a mechanism to really try to not allow people to immigrate to the United States so easily. Sometimes that comes up where they show that they're not helping the situation. And what I mean by that is, and this is the worst part of the cap, in my opinion, is they don't update you in real time. And so I am very confident that we are not going to know the cap demand, the cap numbers, and ultimately when the cap is hit until it's too late for an organization to change their dates. So one of the questions that someone might have is, all right, if we worry that the cap might get hit for November 1st, what can we move our date up to October 15th as the cap is being reached so that we get in? And the answer is no. You have to lock in those dates months earlier. So that's the issue. That's why I'm really nervous this year. And that's why I'm trying to scare a lot of you, because I think that if you're not paying attention to this, you're going to be surprised. And if you just go through your normal process, which in Florida, a lot of you have been very fortunate that you've been able to do that through the years, you're going to be in a lot of trouble and a lot of pain. All right. So here's the way around it. Okay. And this is the way to try to solve the problem, because what I'm also saying to you with the cap is I don't know when it's going to be hit, and I won't know until it is hit. But if we're worried about the cap, and I think for me, the way I'm advising clients is if you don't have an October 1st start date, I would be worried about the cap. I would try to take precautions, because to me, it's all about avoiding surprises. So if you do in-country transfers, this is where you would be able to avoid the cap entirely. So what I mean by that is if you find these workers who are already here, even if the cap is hit, you can still bring them. And so you can kind of just be watching some of your colleagues struggle over to the side while you are getting your in-country workers, and not having to worry about whether or not you're going to get workers to staff for the season. Right now, a few things on in-country workers. You want to be able to find people that want to come to you. Workers can only stay in the country for 3 years consecutively. All right. So workers are allowed to bounce back and forth between seasons, but they can only stay for 3 years. After they hit their 3-year limit, they have to go home for 3 months. The actual amount is 92 days. And then they can come back and they get a new 3-year time. So 3 years here, 3 months home, 3 years here, 3 months home. Okay. During that time, they need to be moving to employers that have approved petitions. So you can only get an in-country worker if you've gone through that long process of getting authorization from the federal government to employ foreign nationals. So one of the big questions I get sometimes is, hey, we found this H-2B worker that's already here. Can we employ them? The answer is no, unless you've gone through that process. And that's where you still need to start the process on April 1st. All right. Now, here are the struggles with in-country recruiting. And a lot of you on this probably know this already. Number one is what I told you just now, that in-country workers don't count against the cap. That's not a secret anymore. This is common knowledge. So it is a very competitive recruiting market. I will also tell you, if you work with a recruiter, the recruiters struggle to find these workers and they only have so many. So they might be pushing you to not do in-country. And this is where I think sometimes recruiters aren't always on your side, where they're trying to essentially, sell their people, and they only have so many in-country workers. The 3-year limit you need to pay attention to for 2 reasons. Number one is you want to make sure that they can stay with you for the whole season. And number two is if they reach their 3-year limit, you're going to need to fly them home at the end of the season. Okay. Whereas if they transfer back to a northern organization or summer season organization, the summer season organization would actually fly them back themselves. You wouldn't have that outbound flight. One of the things that's come up recently, and this is new for last year, is it seems as though U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is the government immigration agency, it seems that they retrain their officers. And what they've done now, what we've seen now, is they're questioning gaps between seasons. So let's say that a summer season employer ends their season September 15th, and your season doesn't start until October 1st. The government most likely now will not approve that worker to transfer to that October 1st organization because there's that 15-day gap. On the other hand, if a worker has an end date of November 1st and your season starts October 1st, that's okay from a petition standpoint. That will get approved, but all of a sudden you have this overlap of seasons where the worker can't be in 2 places at once, and you might need to be negotiating with that other employer where the worker is going to be. In terms of the gaps, going back to that for a second, try to avoid them. The thing that's frustrating for us is that the government's not consistent right now. It's clear they retrain their officers, and you're definitely asking for trouble if you do have gaps. But just understand that we're still seeing approvals if there are gaps. Like, you can still try it, but it's not consistent, and it feels like they're moving towards a system where they will not be approving gaps going forward. All right, so let's talk for a moment about just the state of things and kind of what to expect as we're going. All right, J1s have gotten a lot better. Again, a lot of you don't use these, and so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But if you do use J1s, just remember they're a cultural exchange visa, which means that it's not a work visa. It's a different category. And so a lot of you saw massive delays in trying to bring J1s here during COVID because the State Department, which administers this visa, was trying to hold them back and saying, look, we don't want these kids coming into the United States and being stranded here during a global pandemic. That's starting to clear, but J1s usually come from outside the country. There are still consulate delays. It's crazy that we're still talking about that. But there are still delays. But overall, the J1 program has gotten a lot better in terms of getting back on its feet after the pandemic. In terms of H-2Bs, outside of the demand issue, I would say things are pretty much going well. We're seeing the only reason why I don't fully say they're going great is that we are seeing inconsistent processing times across the board with the Department of Labor, where some applications will get approved in a day, others will get approved like 3 weeks later. But other than that, it feels like the process is pretty stable right now, knock on wood. But the demand issue is what's causing issues. When I'm talking to clients right now, regardless of season, what I'm talking about is demand and recruiting, because those to me are where the struggles are. All right, now, one of the common sense questions that I get all the time is, why don't they fix it? And, I said before when I was describing the cap, this is a common sense. This is an issue that's now affecting both seasons, right? Both winter and summer are dealing with massive supply and demand issues. And a common sense question would be, why doesn't the government fix this thing that is an arbitrary cap, right? It was set in the 90s. It didn't have anything to do with anything. The issue that I see is that one of the strengths of the H-2B program is that it has bipartisan support. So there's a lot of Republicans that very highly support H-2Bs. And part of that is that H-2Bs are very heavily used in a lot of Republican states, very, very red states. But there's also Republican opposition because there's that whole demographic of Republicans that say immigration takes US jobs. On the Democrat side, you have the pro-immigration Democrats that support it, but then you have labor unions that don't. And so the labor unions very much oppose H-2Bs. So one of the strengths of H-2Bs is that because there's bipartisan support, it's not going away, but because there's bipartisan opposition, it's very hard to get changes enacted. And then you add in that it's a midterm election year and that immigration is such a toxic political issue, even when we're talking about staffing with H-2Bs. Because if H-2B reform happened, I have no doubt it would say immigration reform in the news. So there are efforts being made. A bunch of Republicans actually proposed a bill that would bring back what was this thing called the returning worker exemption that said anyone who's been here in the last 3 years in one of the last 3 years in H-2B status is exempt from this cap. They actually proposed to bring that back permanently, and then it got stalled. So there are efforts. I know that some of the lobbyists that deal very heavily with this are actually pretty optimistic long-term, like post-midterm elections. But as we're heading into your 2022 to 2023 H-2B visa petitions, you need to know that the law is not going to change before then. So you need to plan around the cap, around in-country transfers if you feel like you want to go that way, and not count on the government to fix this issue for at least this year. All right, so really, so here's what I'm saying. Numerical cap is an issue, okay? I don't know when it's going to be hit, but I worry about anyone that has a November 1st start date and later. And November 1st is a scary date because a lot of our clients, especially on the west coast of Florida, have November 1st start dates. And that is what scares me for this year. Just saying this out loud, if the cap accelerates at the same speed that it did last year, that would mean that anyone with an October 15th start date and later would be affected. But we just don't know. And that's, we're trying to plan around a bit of an unknown here. And that's hard. In-country transfers, I have no doubt that the demand will be greater for that than ever before. There are definitely enough workers. I get that question a lot. Are there enough workers? Are workers looking? They're there, and I'll show you how you can find them in a moment. But the workers are here, but the workers also know that they have the power. And especially if the worker doesn't come work, if the worker's new to your club, you're going to need to really sell them and keep in touch with them, because we see a lot of workers that are new to an organization that back out last minute. And then God only knows what the future holds with COVID. But obviously, we all know that we can't control the world anymore. All right. So here's the common mistakes that I see. And this is kind of good for a lot of you to just go through this, because a lot of you use H-2Bs and have programs that you've had for quite a while. Not planning ahead is a killer, especially right now. So April 1st, I can't say that date enough. If you plan ahead and if you really think through things, then you're going to be okay. I have spoken with almost every one of our winter season clients going back to probably like Thanksgiving, starting to plan for next year and trying to really make sure that they're in a place that they understand what's coming and that they're in a position that they're going to get their workers. One of the next mistakes is changing employment during the season. You definitely cannot do promotions, and you might not be able to change rent deductions, salary, bonuses, and so on. I would say make sure you ask your provider, whoever files your H-2B petitions, make sure that you ask them about any changes in employment before doing it to see if you can. Because you might be able to, but you also might not be able to, and that can cause a lot of problems. Missing deadlines goes hand in hand with not planning ahead. Not communicating with department heads. I think this is true at this point for all of staffing and HRs. You know, a lot of you have the best of intentions, but if your department heads aren't following through with what you're promising new hires, that kind of crushes you. not telling the government when a worker's employment ends. That's one of the compliance obligations. We do it for free at our office for our clients, but that needs to be done. You need to have one person at an organization that's really taking ownership and control of the process. It's okay if you have multiple people working on it, but having multiple points of contact and not a clear leader, we've seen that cause a lot of problems. Passive recruiting. This year, that's especially true. You cannot expect the same recruiting situation as before. People aren't going to just walk through the door this year. You need to really be on that. You need to be ahead of it. Most of our winter season clients really ramp up their recruiting after July 4th, but you should be doing a lot now, especially if you want to do in-country recruiting. Now is the time to be really starting to facilitate relationships with opposite season organizations so that you can talk about how you can recruit their workers. Setting expectations and under communicating with workers is also an issue. Travel reimbursement issues, and also creating precedents in what you reimburse. And then we talked about this, gaps and overlaps in employment for in-country workers. All right, so that's what we see. To sum this up, plan ahead and ask the person or organization that files your petitions before making changes, and you'll be okay. All right, so it has been about 34 minutes since we started this webinar, and hopefully I scared a lot of you, because you should be worried. You need to be paying attention this year. But the question that I think a lot of this leads to is, should you be looking at international workers this year? And I think the answer is yes, especially for most of you, right? I mean, I will tell you, I feel like I know Florida really well. Just again, we work with more of you in Florida than anywhere else. I'm on the board of the National Club Association. Like, clubs is what we do, what I do. You're not finding Americans, and you're not finding Americans for jobs that you were finding Americans for 2 years ago. International workers at least want to work, right? And so it's just getting them to the property. And so to me, the solution isn't whether or not you utilize international workers, it's how you utilize them correctly and making sure that you can find them. So I said this at the beginning of this webinar, and I'm going to pivot for a second and talk about Seasonal Connect. I started Seasonal Connect with my business partner, Carly Eglin, during the pandemic. And I did this by accident. This was purely a coincidence, but I didn't realize that there was a massive staffing crisis on the horizon when we started this idea. But I'm going to play this 60-second video. It's better than me droning on about what this is. And it'll give you a good idea of what we built.
If you're a seasonal employer, you could feel all alone in the challenges you're facing. Overwhelmed by recruiting and unable to find workers. Buried in housing and transportation difficulties. And full of questions with no one to ask for answers. That's all about to change, thanks to Seasonal Connect. Seasonal Connect unites complementary businesses with the workers they need and the professional services that make everything run smoothly. You'll receive help finding in-country recruiting partners, seasonal workers, American and international, solutions for housing, daily transportation, and a smart community of other seasonal employers. Open doors to a new world of solutions for seasonal employers. Contact Seasonal Connect today.
Okay, so as an immigration lawyer, I am saying this not as the owner of Seasonal Connect. All of you should join this platform. It is amazing, and it's going to solve a lot of your issues. Pabian Law and Seasonal Connect are two entirely different companies. All right, we have different teams. The only constant is me. I own Pabian Law fully, and I own a part of Seasonal Connect, but they're two entirely different organizations. Right now at Pabian Law, we're struggling with some capacity issues because we have so much demand for our services that we keep having to close our practice to new clients. Seasonal Connect is made so that we can help everyone. And so if you join Seasonal Connect and you're not a Pabian Law client, that's fantastic. That's actually exactly what we had in mind. There will never be any pressure to work with Pabian Law. A lot of you that have existing relationships with other providers, we want to help you. You don't need to work with our law firm, but in two entirely different companies. So here's what you can do through Seasonal Connect. And some of this is the first time that you can do this. So first of all, you can find opposite season organizations. So you can search by dates. So you can make sure that your dates work with the other ones so that there's not too much overlap or there's not a gap. You can search to see if they're a club, if they're a hotel, if they're a resort or restaurant. You can search by size, by industry, by location. That you can go into the weeds. There's about over 100 different search criteria that you can use to find different employers. The employers are so active and they want to connect. It's a really amazing group. And so it allows you to find in-country recruiting partners. What's also really amazing about this is we're seeing real situations now where employers are using Seasonal Connect to actually find in-country recruiting opportunities for Americans. So they're actually partnering. A lot of organizations that don't even utilize H-2B workers are going into Seasonal Connect and using it to find an opposite season organization and saying, hey, look, we want to present to your Americans. We want to give them opportunities, and it's working. It's really amazing. It also provides you benchmarking information. So you can see what others are charging for housing, if they own housing, what they're doing about how far does a worker need to travel to get to work each day. In addition to the employer search, you can also search for workers. Again, you can go as broad or as specific as you want. You can find Americans through it. You can click a checkbox and find in-country H-2Bs. So by clicking 2 boxes, I could find all of the in-country line cooks that I want by literally clicking 2 checkboxes. And I can even search by dates of if they're going to hit their 3-year limit, when their H-2B ends. But again, you can also find Americans. You can post jobs into Seasonal Connect, and when you post the jobs, you can connect them with your existing jobs so that you don't have to do multiple, so that they all go to the same place. But when you post jobs, you can show, do you accept out-of-country H-2Bs, in-country H-2Bs, Americans, J-1s? You can show them exactly what you're looking for. We provide housing and daily transportation support and assistance. And then we have this incredible community. So half of Seasonal Connect is this platform that is frankly one of the easiest to use things I've ever done. If I can figure out how to use it, it's so easy. The other side of Seasonal Connect is this community feature where we do virtual and in-person events so that you're creating these relationships with other employers from around the country and around Florida, where number one, you can facilitate these in-country recruiting partnerships to find the H-2Bs, to find the Americans. But in addition to that, you can get your questions answered, right? Like, how are you dealing with this specific issue? We do a lot with this. We do in-person conferences. We do 4 a year. We're actually planning one in Florida in August. More to come on that because we're finalizing that right now. We just came back from Big Sky, Montana. We're going to Utah next. The in-person events are amazing. We also do virtual events. Every 3 weeks, we do these roundtables on Zoom where we break people out and put them into breakout rooms and ask them topics, and they collaborate. We also do these webinars every week where 1 week we showcase a worker. So we interview a seasonal worker and all of the employers are invited, and they get to hear, what does a worker want? What are they looking for? What's going to make them happy? What's in the mind of a seasonal worker? The next week we highlight an employer and we invite all the workers to it. And the workers get to hear about the employer, find out what they're thinking, what they're looking for, and it always results in a lot of applications on the back end. So the community piece to me is actually amazing. So where we are today, we have over 325 employers and over 6,000 workers. The ratio is wonderful. What we're doing right now, I was telling Beth as we were waiting for this, is we're actually investing all of our money and then some into 2 campaigns right now. One is aimed at American workers. The other is aimed at in-country H-2Bs to really go out and continue to push them into the system. Once we do that, we're going to open up Seasonal Connect to kind of the masses from an employer standpoint. But to me, the ratio is what makes this really special. And we've actually seen thousands of job applications and job postings and applications are coming in. Like it's amazing to see the numbers of workers getting hired through this. So here's not only the importance of and relevance of Seasonal Connect right now, but also why internationals, you're going to have to go this route really to fill roles. This is a little bit old at this point. It's gotten even worse. But about 2 months ago, the US Department of Labor announced that there were 11 million job postings, but only 6.5 million Americans looking. So there was a 4.5 million gap between the amount of Americans looking and the amount of jobs, so that there's just not enough people to hold the jobs. And that's why so many of you are looking at H2Bs in larger numbers, looking at new roles, but also why Seasonal Connect is so needed, because you need to be looking at in-country workers. It's also a really easy way to find workers in general. It's so much cheaper than a recruiter. So, you know, from my standpoint, this works if only if we work together. And you know, I think that's what Seasonal Connect opens up for you. For anyone that wants to sign up, you can sign up online, right online at seasonalconnect.com. If you enter, I'm going to put a promo code in because I meant to do that. If you enter the promo code Pabian Law 21, you'll get 10% off your monthly fees. Sorry, I meant to put that in. But I cannot stress this enough. Join Seasonal Connect. Let's say, hopefully, Alice just emailed me or just messaged me. Do you have to be a member of Seasonal Connect to participate in virtual and in-person events? Yes, you can only do these if you're a member. And frankly, we have organizations that are joining just for the events right now, like not even for the platform. And I think that's spot on. So it is 10:45, pretty much 10:44. We have about 15 minutes for questions. I'm also happy to answer any questions that you might have in general. But again, I can't stress this enough. It is going to be a really difficult filing year. All of you should be concerned. There's only so many out-of-country workers out there. We're seeing more demand from organizations that never would have done H2Bs before the staffing crisis, and you need to be ready. And all of you, I can't stress this enough, as an immigration lawyer, look into Seasonal Connect, consider joining, because it really is a real solution to the situation that we're all in. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. You can either unmute yourself, you can put them in the chat, but I am here to help. And while we're waiting, before I forget, the link, make sure you fill out the survey so you get your credits. The password is difficult. Beth just put it in, difficult with a capital D. Staffing is going to be difficult this year. I would like to think Beth thought of that because staffing is going to be difficult, not because I'm difficult. But in the meantime, we got our first question. What can you tell us about housing and how competitive we need to be with subsidies, et cetera? So that's a great question. So the question is, just to repeat it, how competitive is housing going to be? And do you need to be thinking about like how much you subsidize for housing? So this is what I would say. For the winter season, especially outside of the ski industry, most organizations don't have housing on site. Some of you do, and the ones that do, it's a huge benefit, and you should be shouting that from the rooftops during recruiting. But if you don't own housing, there are two issues going on with housing, and I know I'm telling everyone this. The first issue is that housing is so expensive, and it's getting so much more expensive. And so what we're seeing is the employee housing that they're finding, or you're finding, is getting further and further away from your clubs, and that's hard. The other issue is that recruiting's hard. And Michael, I think this is a great question, because you do want to be competitive. This is where I can help you in helping you understand like what others are charging. But I would say at this point, most of our clients are subsidizing housing to some extent, just because housing has gotten so expensive, and they are trying to be competitive in recruiting. You definitely want to make sure that you are selling your club during recruiting, but you're not overselling. You need to be selling, but also telling the truth. Like if you have crappy housing, or if housing is an hour from the club, you need to be honest about that, because you want to make sure you're setting expectations, but you need to be doing it in the context of still selling your organization. Any other questions? You all must be busy signing up for Seasonal Connect. So David just asked, do you secure housing first? And this is actually one of the hardest parts the first year that you're doing H-2Bs, you need to make this decision of how much risk you're willing to take with housing, because what I see is that most organizations, the first year they're doing H-2Bs, will have to make the decision to start the process before they're fully able to secure the housing. And so from that standpoint, most organizations in the first year don't have housing secured when they start the process on April 1st. But that kind of happens as you go. But if you're able to secure the housing, that's great. But there is a leap of faith that first year, most of the time with organizations, is they're trying to secure housing in conjunction with starting the process. It's the same way that you don't know who the workers are when you start the process, but you have to start. All right. Okay. So Christy just asked, will there be problems or caps on visas other than the standard limits if we are now looking at utilizing both J1s and H-2Bs, since we are no longer a seasonal operation and very busy year round, but can't find workers? Basically, we were going above what our previous seasonal needs were and are afraid that new increased needs for visas will be questioned. Christy, I'm glad you asked this question. Also, hey, Christy, this is a great question. So the answer is, even if you're year round, which a lot of you are, you can still apply for H-2Bs as long as you can show the seasonal bump. If you are in Florida, and Christy, your club, I know where you are, you will still be able to show the seasonal bump. I know all of you are getting busier, and your members, a lot of you, your members aren't leaving in such large numbers. You know, like your members are still hanging out to an extent over the summer. So, but that being said, I have no doubt that your revenues are still higher over the traditional Florida season. And you would still be able to apply for H-2Bs. What we have to show is the bump. It doesn't need to be flat during the off season. So even if you're year round, even if you're seeing that you're busier than you were year round, you can still apply for H-2Bs as long as you can show some level of bump. And also the bump doesn't have to be a perfect mountain, right? Realistically, there's some waves along the way. David asks, confirming you have to do separate applications for the different positions. Applications for cooks, application for servers. Is that correct? And that's spot on. That's exactly right. You have to file different applications for different positions. There was also a period of time, and some of you I think still do this, where you used to be able to file for kind of a blanket position, like it might be like club worker, resort worker. That time has gone, and that's where you could get into a lot of trouble with audits. You need to apply based on what you have in payroll. So the way that you run your payroll or your coding, I shouldn't say payroll, it's really coding. The way that you do that and you code different departments and different positions, that's what you have to apply for in your roles. Yeah, and then Alice, thanks for saying that. You know, Alice was saying that her organization didn't have housing secured before recruitment, but they did it exactly right, or not. You did it right, but also you did it practically in that you had to start the process, and then you had to start the H-2B visa process while you were looking for housing. And then Steve, I just saw you wrote Eagle Creek took an apartment in August on a 1-year lease. One thing I am hearing in Southern Florida is a lot of you are now having to actually sign year-round leases instead of seasonal, which makes sense, right? It seems like you're able to bring housing back closer to the club if you can sign those year-round leases and budget for that. But it's the reality of the situation that in the midst of the staffing crisis, we're also in the midst of a housing crisis as well.
The market's still very limited right now down here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, you know, we work all over the country. I think you all are in some of the most competitive housing markets out there. I remember when I first started working in Florida, you know, depending on what side of the highway you were on, you were able to find staff housing, right? If you were on the side away from the ocean, and that is definitely no longer the case. All right, so as a reminder, the password for today is difficult with a capital D. It sounds like it's case sensitive. I think this is a good ending point, but I really am happy to answer any questions about H2Bs, about Seasonal Connect. Good luck to all of you. It's going to be a hard year, but I'm positive we can get through this. And thank you so much to Beth and the organization, to all of you for tuning in. So have a great day, everyone, and best of luck to all of you.